In this video, we're going to take a look at a purple ink by Private Reserve's their DC Supershow Violet. Now, as always, there's timestamps down below so you can skip around, but if you've got the time, I'd appreciate you checking out the entire video. Also down in the description is a link to the purple ink playlist, so if you want to see more purples, you can find that there. I'm an ink guy, and let's get into the first writing sample done on 90 GSM Clairfontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. We have no feather, spread, halo sheen. We are getting some spotting of shading throughout in the extra fine where it goes from dark to very dark, dark to a very dark, throughout the extra fine and even in the medium. So it is there. It's gentle when it happens, but it is attention grabbing. That's what I would call it. In general, we have the same tone. The extra fine took 11 seconds to dry, while the medium took 16. The scrubby of the extra fine and the medium don't show a ton of color variation. If you look the far left to the far right, you do see that it's there, and that's the kind of gentle tone change that we get in the writing. Smear test you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. To have a range of experience with this ink, all of the writing samples are done with a Jinhao 159 with a 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a medium, and a Jinhao X750 with an extra fine. Then a Pilot vanishing point with a medium nib is inked up, used for a day, and used to take the notes for this video. The next writing sample is done on 52 GSM Tomoe River. We have no bleeding, but a ton of ghosting with this very thin paper. We have no feather, spread, halo sheen. We do get some, or no shade, we get some tone variation as the stub is lighter than the extra fine. So it's just a little bit darker, and just a little bit darker again, the medium. The extra fine took 16 seconds to dry, and the medium took 31. The scrubby for both show us no color variation. We're not getting it here. And the smear test, I do not think you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. I agree with Vita. There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. A line of ink is put down, and then it's put in the water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see that it really just pushes away from the water, gathering at the top. We don't see any other colors in it, so it's a single dye to get this ink. The one on the right that's allowed to dry for 10 minutes, the ink pushes slower up. It is grabbing a hold of the filter paper a little bit as it's moving. Not much difference between the two of them, and you probably really couldn't tell the difference if it wasn't marked. I'm not expecting much resistance from this ink. The next writing sample is done on 80 GSM Rhodia dot pad. No bleeding, no ghosting, except here at the scrubby, which we don't tend to worry about. We have no feather, spread, halo sheen. We have a very, very light peppering of shading in the extra fine, where you've got a few darker areas that do show themselves. Now, the extra fine is a tad bit darker than the stub, and the medium is noticeably darker all the way through than the extra fine. The extra fine took 9 seconds to dry, while the medium took 17. Scrubby for both give us no color variation, although we do get that little peppering that's quite nice in the extra fine. Scrubby, smear test says you probably could recover if you smeared while you were writing. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on a page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. The smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, you would probably be pretty safe using it in a note-taking situation. Yes, it does spread, and yes, it does give a little bit of feathering in what's going on there, but all of the information is intact, so if you wanted to be able to go back and highlight, you could. That's very surprising when you look at what happens to water. With only 30 seconds, we start to see some of the white of the paper coming through. Probably why it only took water to get it out of my pen. Pen flesh does everything that water does, and a little bit faster. 1/3 bleach solution, you're not going to need it, but it does completely destroy the ink. The next writing sample is done on Leuchtturm 1917 paper. We have no bleeding, but we do have some very minor ghosting on the medium. Now, I don't see this stopping anybody from using the back of the page. We have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. Little bit of tone variation. The extra fine's the same as the stub, where the medium noticeably much darker. Extra fine took 7 seconds to dry and the medium took 10. Scrubby for both give no color variation. We're not getting it in the writing, and the smear test I do not think you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average viscosity is 2.5, and the realm of normal is 2.1 to 2.9. Private Reserve's DC Supershow Violet has a viscosity of 2.49, making it almost average, but it is still normal. If you're interested in how the viscosity tests and all that's done, then down in the description is a link to that video. The next writing sample is done on 28-pound copy paper. We have a couple of bleed spots that are heavy into the paper on the extra fine, not too bad, and its ghosting's really not too bad. I don't see it being a problem. Now when it comes to the medium, it's bleeding much more regularly deep into the paper, not through the paper. I don't know that you could use the back of the page when it comes to the medium, but I would say that you could for the extra fine. None of it came anywhere near touching the next page. Now we do have some very minor feathering that's occurring on the medium, none on the extra fine. We have no spread on the medium, but a little bit of spread on the extra fine. It comes to about a fine. We have no halo, no sheen, no shade. Slight tone variation. The extra fine's a little bit lighter than the medium. The extra fine took 1 second to dry. Its scrubby shows no color variation. It didn't have it. And the smear test, you can't smear it, so you don't have to worry about it. For the inks tested, the average dry time is 17 seconds, and the realm of normal is 13 to 21 seconds. Private Reserve's DC Supershow Violet has an average dry time of 17 seconds, so it's average. The last writing sample is done on crowd favorite 20-pound copy paper. So in the medium, this stuff up here is a problem. This caused a lot of touching the next page. Stop touching me. It just kept corrupting the next page. You could not use a medium and get away with it. The extra fine for all of this heavy bleed in did not come through and touch the next page, but you can't use the back of the page at all. Now, both of them have an extreme amount of tiny feathers. They both experience spread. No halo, no sheen, no shade. The extra fine took 1 second to dry. The scrubby showed no color variation, and there is none. The smear test, you can't smear it. What's funny is, no matter how this actually looks, I think in the extra fine, I can still see plenty of people using it, and just complaining a little bit about it looking a bit dull here. Instead of finding inks that look like Private Reserve's DC Supershow Violet, I'd prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I decided to go with an orange ink by Krishna, their Orange Honey. Now, if you'd prefer a different complement color, then down in the description are links to those playlists. So what do I think of Private Reserve's DC Supershow Violet? A nice, dark, and bright purple. It does give some tone variation and some decent shading, especially in that extra fine. This, in its writing, matched the swatch perfectly. Perfectly predictable as to what it will look like on the page. A very rare thing to happen. So what nib and pen are going to give the best writing experience with this ink? I really see it as a dealer's choice. I think it always looks good, and it's just a matter of if you want it to be a bit darker from a wetter pen or a bit lighter from a medium to dry pen. But I don't see the nib making the biggest difference in how this comes across to you. I hope you got something out of this video, and in the next video, we're going to take a look at Diamine's Burgundy Royale.